Okay. Continue. Thank you. Thank you for spending some time on a Saturday morning to have a discussion regarding the league as we move forward into a new year. My former boss used to say the curse was to live in interesting times, and that seems to be where we are. These are interesting times for a number of reasons, and certainly all of them affecting the league. The league board was able to have an annual retreat in July, and it was actually at a point where we thought it was okay to come together, and we did. It was wonderful to really be able to have a discussion. So the goals that I'm going to be talking about really came from that gathering. Not a huge change from previous goals. I think our mission and purpose remains a constant. But what is changing, of course, is the times and the conditions in which we operate. So with that, Anne, let's see if I can pull this together.
Sure you can.
Okay.
There we go. There you go. You got it.
Look at that. Oh. So many new skills. Okay. Okay, Sarah Lee, I took your advice. I just experimented a bit with what was available in a program. So there's the horizon, and hopefully it looks like a local one. First couple of goals we talked about, of course, to educate, motivate, and empower citizens for upcoming elections. This is the heart of our organization, and that really doesn't change. This is who we are and why we come together. The education and advocacy, this really lists a number of our core purposes. Of course, going back to election integrity, which is becoming much more of a priority than in the past because it's under attack as it has never been in the past. Public education, continuing to be a challenge. Social justice issues go on. Natural resources, always a high priority in this county in particular. There's a strong audience for the environment in Volusia County. And strong representative government. We have a number of dynamics in that area that are affecting our business. And these goals speak more to how we proceed with our mission, listening to underrepresented voices and educating ourselves on historic and ongoing systemic racism. This is certainly becoming an issue attached to what's happening with voting restrictions. Collaboration and positive relationship with diverse groups. I think this is going to go in a couple of different directions, and we'll talk some about this. Collaboration, I think, is going to be important for this organization going forward. The issues are large. We are not the only voice that is addressing them, and we need some partners. We also need to look at our relationships with diverse groups and how we can reach out, both in terms of age groups, geographic groups, ethnic groups in the community. It's an important expansion for us to continue to pursue. Oops. Oh dear. Well, Son of a gun. Ann, any thoughts?
How are you trying to advance?
I'm trying to advance using my arrows. That's what this is supposed to be.
Try it with your mouse instead.
There we go. God bless you, Linda.
You bet.
Okay. Okay, voter services and elections. Registration is going to be a major focus for us, certainly over the next 2 to 4 years. There are new regulations and coming from the legislature in the last term, and we will need training in them. I've been able to talk briefly with Lisa Lewis, and we are setting up a time to meet with Lisa. Myself, Nancy Nussbaum, who is our new voter services chair, will be meeting with Lisa to talk about a few issues, but specifically how we train and then pass training on to the folks with the league that want to be involved in registration. Adding online capability. I asked Lisa about this. Carla had suggested that we look more at doing online registrations. It's certainly available if someone has Florida identification, Florida driver's license. And it saves not only the work of a paper process, but it gives, I think it acquaints someone with the options in terms of how they can track themselves in the voting system. The scheduled availability is something I would like to look at. In terms of, we've always gone to different events. We have Board Orange Days coming up, but scheduled availability is something that I think we can pursue because if it's scheduled, it can be advertised. So if we look at periods where we can go to public libraries or other government offices, or try to set ourselves up like a kiosk, we can publish those events and perhaps meet an audience we might not otherwise. There's also some new audiences. We have a lot of new people coming into the county, moving into the county. Some of them are concentrated in certain HOAs and or certain geographic areas, and we may be able to reach out there. I'd also like if we can get the colleges to agree that perhaps we can be at their libraries on a regular basis. Education, how elections work is becoming of critical importance. There is so much information out there about election fraud, election tampering, and a lot of it is based on bad information about how elections are actually conducted, who's responsible for them, what the chain of voting looks like. And I offered to Lisa Lewis to say, can we be part of an outreach in terms of educating citizens about just how elections work? And I think that's going to be an avenue for us to partner a bit with the elections office. Issues education is something we've always done. Some issues are very specific to certain years. Our ongoing issues, of course, are always with, again, education, environmental issues, juvenile justice flared for a while. We still have issues with returning citizens. So issues, some will rise to a priority, and some are, I will just consider sustaining issues. Our candidate forums, Ann did an amazing job just recently helping out with the Lake Helen Forum. It's always an interesting group. It had an excellent turnout of folks in the Lake Helen community. But next year is going to be, there will be a lot of elections, particularly at the local level. Some of them are coming about with changes in the county government. Amendment 10 has restructured county government, and also redistricting will bring about some elections. So candidate forums, I think, are going to be of a higher priority, of course, next year with the midterms. Our election support. Again, with changes in the law, drop box availability has become more restricted. One of the requirements is that drop boxes have to be staffed by elections employees. Those employees can be temps, but they must be election employees. But it's an area where we may be able to, again, provide some support just to improve the access, both in terms of locations and hours. It's an unfortunate product of the legislature that we couldn't continue to celebrate the success of last year's election. We had about 5 minutes of saying how great it was and how well we did, and then it was over. And instead of saying, what else can we do? Look at what we did under the worst of conditions. And what we can do even better now. And instead it went the other direction. It became more about what I would call election anxiety. It didn't actually happen. It's an anxiety of fostered by again, misinformation. I think the canvassing board, we have always participated in canvassing boards. I think this will become a higher profile activity. And I think we will need to probably structure our participation or our availability for this, because it's going to be more critical. There is more room for challenges, for claims, and I think we will be an important support system for the election process. Redistricting will start later this year. In fact, I believe our local representative, Tom Leek, will be heading up that effort. Redistricting, the census in Central Florida has shown that we are where the growth in Florida has been in terms of percentage of population. It's in Central Florida, and so it's anticipated that Central Florida will receive a new district or two. I think Florida qualifies for two, but certainly at least one of them will be in Central Florida. We have a Fair Districts Act that came out of the last census after much litigation. And so I expect that we will be revisiting how, again, that's applied under this census and how these lines are going to be redrawn. What's coming? I think looking at other states is probably an indicator of things that may be coming. And in terms of efforts to move elections away from local supervisors and into state legislative groups. So I'm concerned about that in terms of, again, just a general movement of authority away from local officials and to the state. Educate and advocate. These are our cores. Public education, we continue to see the erosion of resources from public education going into vouchers and therefore the private system. The accountability issue remains critical to us. These are public dollars, and yet when they're distributed, that seems to be the end of it in terms of any accountability back to the public for what's for how the dollars are being used, what the conditions are, and what the performance achievements are. So I think this issue will stay important. There's a new strategic plan in Volusia County. We had a presentation by Superintendent Fritz talking about that. I think we will remain focused on how that implementation goes. I watched the school board meeting, public participation the other night because of the focus on masking. And the State League had provided a sample for a letter that could be addressed regarding masking requirements and asking that they be required. I think certainly the conditions that we are functioning under right now in terms of cases, positivity, hospital demand, the fact that younger children are still not eligible for vaccinations, it's critical, and we crafted a letter to send to our own school board asking that this issue remain open. It needs to be responsive to what conditions are and how their conditioning conditions are changing, even though we only look every week in terms of new data from the state. Social justice. This will tie back to a lot of our voting issues and our outreach. I think we will be needing to look at partnerships to expand how we reach some new communities. We were for the first time contacted by a church, someone with a church in Pearson, and that's a community we've been trying to reach for quite a while. Churches may be an opportunity for us. And certainly if someone in that church is with us, it gives us an avenue, not just an invitation, but some credibility going into a new community. The implementation of restored rights remains a challenge. I think that probably the state will be focusing on this, but I keep waiting for someone to demand the bill for all of these folks, and perhaps there's maybe an audience with our judges in terms of addressing this issue, at least going forward, as far as when court costs are being imposed and how they can be capped or controlled, something that gives more shape to this burden than it has right now. Natural resources, we're always focused on water issue, and that's both water for potable and then surface water conditions. We look at what's the quality of the water coming out of our ground, because that's our source, and then what are we doing to surface waters in terms of stormwater management, flooding, general conditions, septic systems, always an issue here. Conservation will remain a priority as the availability of water is under increasing demand with a new population. And I think the infrastructure funding that I'm still anticipating will finally find its way out of the federal government and work its way down could be a tremendous opportunity. These windows of funding don't open often, and when they do, it will be important to try and channel them, and the community needs to be part of that. I hope there isn't just a list somewhere without the benefit of public input to talk about some of the opportunities in terms of new technology. Green infrastructure has been an issue. And then also correcting some of the substandard infrastructure that's in place what's in the ground right now. Septic systems, again, are a big part of, if 100,000 are in the ground, and they are in Volusia County, probably half of them are under the wrong conditions. And so it would be an interesting project to try and address those that are most affecting their surface water bodies. Strong representative government. The old quote, best government is the government closest to the people. We're going to be seeing the continued restructuring of county government. We have new officials that are elected independently. We'll be having a presentation from the new tax collector. This is an office that hasn't existed since the charter was established in the 70s. So it's been 50 years since we've had a tax collector. You know, what is that going to mean? And then we have, again, the other offices. The sheriff is now sort of split off on his own. These are independent offices now. They are not really subject to the same kind of structure that the charter had provided before. Also, the state involvement in local issues continues. We've seen constant erosion in growth management moving to the state authority over the years. There is less and less that local jurisdictions can even speak to in terms of some growth management issues and permitting. Even some of the laws that we saw, the anti-riot bill that came out of the legislature, flag waving from the state, but the impact, if there was an actual riot, that all falls on local government. You know, that's a case of, you know, that's the guy who holds your coat in a bar fight. So the state is really just has the ability to say, yeah, let's you and him fight, and they don't get their hair mussed. So those are some of the things, you know, we need to stay and be attentive to in terms of state government. Issue-driven teams. This is what I mentioned earlier about issues that will arise during the year. I don't know what will happen with reproductive rights in healthcare. It seems to be rearing its head in different parts of the country. Juvenile justice we were able to settle in on some positive changes there, but I think that will continue to be an issue for a while. Outreach and collaborative relationships. We're a small organization. We can't do it all. We need partners, both internally. When I say that, I think we can partner perhaps with some other leagues on some issues. We have good partners available in Central Florida, and I think we can look to them to work with us. Also, organizations who are also involved and engaged in voter issues and voter engagement. Separate issues, affordable housing kinds of issues offer some different partnerships that we can look at. And then diverse communities. I mentioned Pearson. I mentioned the colleges. We need to figure out how do we replicate our experience with Stetson. Unfortunately, that's the kind of program the original participants are going to graduate. It's inherently going to have turnover, but it would be good if we could reach out and replicate that structure in other college settings. Engaging our members. I've been warned that this is difficult, actually doing a survey and getting an effective response. So we will rely on our members to support the response from people that they know in the league. But I think this is important to try and be able to structure some more activities, looking at our members in terms of their skills and experience and what they can bring to our efforts, looking at what the interests are among different members and what issues they would like to be engaged in. Availability is a pretty major issue. It's always true in any organization. A small number of people do a lot of the front work, but there is so much more that we can accomplish also with an online presence. It is not my skill set, I guarantee that, but I think that there are folks who are comfortable working from home, are comfortable creating content, are comfortable doing research, and are comfortable with project availability. Can't be involved all the time, don't really want to connect into a particular action team, but I'm committed. I'll make myself available during this period of an election. So again, we know who's available and on what basis. Social interests, we've always had some wonderful activities where we come together, we have speakers, we have lunches. Wondering if there are maybe some other opportunities, just some interests that would allow us to socialize with common interests on a very informal basis, so that we could put out calls the way people do for just gatherings. We're getting together Tuesday at 2:00 for a beach walk, or we're getting together for we're going to meet at the Gemini Springs for a picnic. You know, bring your own and come, because inevitably when we do get together, it is for it involves the work we do, and we have still wonderful conversations in addition to our socializing. So upcoming events. The Senate Bill 90, this is the training that I think we're going to be putting together probably for a group. We'll try to train the trainers and then have the ability to pass training on. I mentioned the new tax collector. The opioid addiction, we're trying to put a panel together. Affordable housing is really becoming a very active issue, I think, in response to a lot of what the community is seeing in terms of housing costs, going through a major escalation, even as multifamily housing is built. It's not, what's being built is not affordable to a lot of this community. The Alice report to give us a better picture of what's going on with income and income balance in the community. Ladies Taking Liberty, I'll give this a special shout out. This is a review that's being planned at the Athens Theater. The evenings, November 2nd will be elections night, and also it will be the next night, but we are going to be gathering the evening of November 2nd as a celebration of this review. It's taking the writings, the poetry, songs associated with suffragettes and the suffrage movement and bringing them together. And we are going to be celebrating that in DeLand. This is a Politicos event. Politicos is partnering with this event. We could not make the fashion show come together. It is still just not the right time to try and assemble that way, and support from the stores is shaky. So we were able to gather around this event and let Politicos be a sponsor of some of the other activities. Gemini Springs, we talked about having a program at Gemini Springs, not only because it's a beautiful place, but because it's an interesting place. It's interesting environmentally. We'll have our holiday social. And after the first of the year, we're trying to, Cecile Swoon, who's the new president for the state of Florida, is visiting local leagues, and we will be asking her to put us in her calendar after the first of the year. So that's that. Let me see. Stop share. Okay. So with that, I would like to hear some of your thoughts about things that you think are important, especially if we miss them or you think that we need to prioritize something more. Let's see. There's Olga. Olga was saying she was hired as a temp to guard a drop box at the Port Orange Library. I think we're going to see more of that. So any comments from the audience? We'd love to hear it, because we don't often get this opportunity to just chat generally about league direction.
Mary, is the Dropbox, you mentioned that the person has to be employed by the election services.
Yes.
So does that mean that the league cannot volunteer to do that?
We cannot. They have to be, you can work for a temp service and be hired that way, but you have to be an elections employee, and that's their obligation.
That was how it happened last time. And so when I went to volunteer, I was told that I had to be hired. So they hired me as a temp, and then I served the term. But I wore my league button, which was permitted. And, you know, there were two of us, one from each party. And so, and that was at the early voting site in Port Orange, which, you know, I did the 2 weeks or whatever. So, but I think that rule was already being implemented in, at least in Volusia. Now it's more law. So
Okay.
it's not a change for us.
Okay, so I can just contact the Department of Elections here locally and get that information.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep,
Thanks.
it's with, as I said, Lisa said they would go through a temp service.
Okay.
Marianne,
Yes,
let me
ma'am.
make a clarification, I believe. If someone goes on their own and contacts Lisa to do that, they should not be wearing a league button. And I also just heard one from each party. We don't represent any parties, and we should not be representing the league if
Correct.
we are there representing a party. We have to be very careful about that. Many of us did, excuse me, many of us did the drop boxes. We did it through Carla, our voter service chair, and it was handled, we were paid. And so I don't want to get into that discussion, but I do caution us that if you are going to independently contact the supervisor of elections, you don't wear league buttons. If you go through the league, that's different.
Okay.
Thank you, Ann. As I said, this is going to come up when we meet with Lisa. So I think we can provide current information after that. But Ann is correct. We have to be extremely cautious about how we're presented and what our involvement is. Thank you, Ann.
Carla?
Yeah, we were asked by Lisa to find volunteers, and so I did an outreach to the voter service volunteers. we also coordinated our outreach to the canvas board in the same way. We scheduled people so that we didn't have 5 people one morning and 3 days with no people. So if you know, we're looking towards changes in the election, and we're also looking at election taking place a year from now. So in that process, the supervisor of elections office may be tweaking things and making other decisions, and we don't know if they will ask us to participate or if they will do something different. But what Ann was saying is really true. We don't go representing a party, and we don't go as individuals. It's much better if we work through the league as opposed to sort of on the side and showing up as a league member that way. So we'll see what happens. I think what Olga and Ann and everybody else who volunteered to watch the drop boxes found out that it was really a great opportunity to participate with our community. Everybody seemed to enjoy it. And there was a stipend attached to it, which had to be there because they had to be employees. And now it's part of the law, as we had said.
Thank you, Carla. And Harold, thank you for correcting my spelling. So, God bless. So, any thoughts about things that you see coming up that you think are going to be issues in the community? Or the
Pat
state?
Drago has her hand up, Marianne.
Oops, I'm sorry, I couldn't see you, Pat. Go
No,
ahead.
that's okay. I'm trying to learn how to use this Zoom and do it well. Okay. I wanted to speak to the local redistricting. I think that the redistricting at the local level, and I think explaining, you know, certainly the census data that came out, it clarifies for us the changes that we're seeing in Volusia County, in our communities, and around the state and nation. And I think it's an opportunity for us to meet several of our goals, which is to work with diverse communities, to be better acquainted with diverse communities, and to also make sure that those communities understand the implications of how tracts are divided and how their influence can be concentrated, which in fact almost negates it, or dispersed in a way that can be more influential. So I think explaining that and making sure that we understand it, as well as looking at some of our local lines, and I'm thinking primarily of county council, school district, but then also perhaps cities. But I think understanding and relating to our communities and making sure that those communities understand the implications of where lines are drawn. And it's easy to think if there's more of us in a district, we'll have a stronger influence. When in fact, many times the opposite is true, because what happens is you have a concentrated influence. You may have a representative then guaranteed, but your ability to influence across the board in multiple districts is absolutely negated. So I just think being able to explain that, work with our communities, and understanding based upon census data how diverse that is, I think that's a tremendous opportunity for us to be of service.
Pat, do you think a subcommittee just working the redistricting issue would be useful?
I do. I think it's going to take somebody who understands a little bit. I know Sandra Horakami did all this map drawing for us with the 411, understanding a little bit, not drawing the maps, but understanding a little bit of that, but being acquainted with the community. And we need to make sure that that community is not just a white faith. We have a diverse community, and we have a membership that we can draw on, and we may be able to enrich, but we need to be able to reach out to the and I hesitate to use the word even Latino and the Black community. Our community is diverse and we have mixed. Let's make sure that we that our districts reflect that, and make sure that voices can be heard and that they understand how those voices are best heard. So that's, I think a subcommittee would be ideal for that. And it may be part of the social justice, because being heard is critical. Anyway, that's my thought right now. I think it's going to be the topic of the next 8 to 9 months. And I think the impact will be felt for the next 10 years.
Absolutely. Gwen?
I'm really going to piggyback on, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to piggyback on what was just stated. I sent you something that the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, which I'm a part of, is very much interested in working on redistricting and first learning more about it. So I can tell you that we would very much welcome the opportunity of getting with League of Women Voters and learning more about redistricting, and then doing what we can in working in that process or helping to educate others about the process as well. So we definitely would welcome that. And again, I'm just totally in agreement with what Pat has shared, that the more people we can get involved, the more diverse group we can get involved, because democracy is democracy, period. It involves all of us who consider ourselves as not just citizens, but Americans. So we definitely look forward to working with the League of Women Voters as a member, as a past president, but also as a person who sees the changes that are going on nationally, as well as our state, and the need and importance of voting and ensuring that everyone has an opportunity to vote in addition to their right to vote. So I look forward to that, whether it be by committee or however we want to work that or pull that together. Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority is very much interested, and I would think Deltas might be interested as well.
And you know, Gwen, I think this is an opportunity for us to work with the other community organizations, which is one of our goals. I said
Yes.
League people, but also making sure that we work with people from other communities, and we are a coalition and working together for better democracy. And I'm looking at Olga. We need some people who speak Spanish. We need to be able to go into a variety of communities and reflect our openness and look for their input.
Yes.
Thank you, Gwen. This is exactly the kind of issue where I think we need partners and collaborators to be at our best in terms of having an impact. Olga, you're asking about whether there's a local government. I don't know of any committees yet. They will be formed. Sarah Lee has pointed out different governing entities will have their committees working on their lines, because they're all balancing population.
Right.
I was on the fringe of one, it must have been at least a decade ago. So it's an interesting process, but that won't touch the state or federal districts, which is where I think we'll see.
I'm newer to the county, so I wasn't here 10 years ago, but I've participated in redistricting committees in Virginia for 20 years. And they generally have, because they're government committees, they need to be open. So we should listen to what they're doing and have a, I don't know about a seat at the table, because things here are different. But, the league was very involved in redistricting locally in Virginia. So.
Thanks. I don't remember if there was a citizens committee. It seems like, there must have been some element of oversight, if not crafting. Sarah Lee?
Yeah, I participated 10 years ago, probably with you. And then 20 years prior, I did the city commission lines for City of Daytona. And oftentimes the workshops are public. I don't know that, I do not recall in any of those instances that there was a separate citizens committee established for that purpose. But I know when we did the lines 10 years ago for this county council and school board, we held a number of public, I'll call them workshops, where we presented many scenarios. But I don't believe we did citizen committees. That may be different this time, but I agree with your statement, Marianne. The bulk of the issue that from a league standpoint is going to be at the state and federal level.
I think that's where, that's where there'll be the most efforts in terms of maneuvering district lines.
I think the citizen core observers that we have,
Mhm.
they'll be able to report back to us by their observations of each of the jurisdictions, how that effort is moving forward. And then certainly if any of the bodies want a citizens committee, then, then perhaps that's something someone within the group might be interested in participating, but I'm sure it'll get discussed at the local elected official meetings.
Round table? Okay. I'm sorry, I can't see who's asked to speak.
Gwen for one, and the only thing I wanted to add is that before they make their final decision, whether it's local government or at the state level, they have the public hearings. So if all else fails, you do have an opportunity before final adoption of those plans is approved to actually have people go in and speak to whatever that final draft is that they're presenting for approval.
Okay.
Linda Mosher has her hand up.
I do. I just wanted to reiterate that I think certainly the league itself and local chapters are front and center when it comes to providing fact-finding and information about those changes, and that people will come to the website to have those questions answered. And not necessarily definitively, but if we know where to send someone to find out how the redistricting works in their community, that we can help to guide people to the answers that they need. And as Sarah Lee was saying, we do that through web content kind of reporting, through the observer core, through just reporting from committees. But I think the league has a very central role in sharing information that helps people find out more on their own.
As a related issue, I've started getting some messages from the Census Bureau just talking about census information, and they're doing some webinars. If you really need something to do with the occasional lunchtime, it's just an interesting program, because I mean it's the basis for all of this, but it is interesting to see how the census information becomes part of what affects the community. So I think we'll put together a group to work on that, and also start gathering, if you would, start thinking of groups that we should be collaborating with in terms of the redistricting issue. I agree. And I'm afraid it's going to come very quickly. The census information is a little bit later than usual, but I think this will proceed quickly when it kicks off. So, any other thoughts?
According to the county website, the GIS staff from the county and Volusia County Schools create the several proposed maps. So there is information on the county website on how they do this. We probably need to contact them to see what their schedule is. Because I think that's part of our
Good thought.
teaching the community.
Good thought, right? We'll see what, because that'll give us also our timeline to be involved or respond, but we need to know what the pace is going to be.
Anne?
Yes,
Um,
yes.
I had a question about what is the process, and I don't know that you necessarily know the answer, so anybody, what's the process for like putting together those white papers that that the league generates that would have some of that type of compiled information that would be publicly available?
That Drago from the state, because that's usually where it comes from, but Pat.
Yeah, we had a board meeting yesterday, and the state has just finalized the speakers via the PowerPoint on redistricting, and they are planning workshop training that should be coming up very shortly. So that so that was discussed, and I think they said that the state plans to have its first discussion on districting statewide in September. And I saw Nancy Nussbaum's hand up, just to let you know, Mary Ann.
Okay.
But so the state, I think, already has completed its Speakers Bureau report and will start training on redistricting right away. And the state is encouraging that we work with local organizations, NAACP, sororities, Latino, Hispanic, whatever we can find within our community to make sure that we explain the implications. And there was discussion about some of the local maps because local government is close to us. So anyway, I'll defer now to Nancy. And I know Ann had mentioned that, Tom Leake, Representative Leake, is chair of this for the state. So we should avail ourselves by picking, no, we should avail ourselves of his proximity. I'm sorry. So, and we have to recognize that we do not have the same Florida Supreme Court that we had before. And we do not have even the slight balance of power within the Florida House or Senate. So we cannot expect the same outcome from fair districts in the courts that we had 10 years ago. So I want you to know we're looking at this with very jaded eyes, recognizing that that the community is going to have to put the pressure on at large. Excuse me, and I'll turn this back to Mary Ann for Nancy.
Okay, Nancy?
I don't know if we're ready to change the topic, but I've been thinking more about voter education. It just seems to me we've always done such a great job in educating the public about how to register and how to get a ballot and all the procedural kinds of things. And with SB 90 and who knows what else is going to become an obstacle next year with the way bad information has gotten out, that it seems like we almost need a campaign for the integrity of the elections so that information is out there when some of these, myths and theories and everything start coming out. So why are our elections just? Why are they fair? What is in place that makes our elections be trustworthy? And I wonder if some of our material and the things that we talk about while we're registering people should address it directly, just up front, since that was an issue where I don't think it ever was before.
Certainly not what we're seeing now. I think that's a great idea. People who vote are engaged, but there's so many people who seem to be on a tipping point in terms of just their confidence in government generally, and then their confidence in elections specifically.
Mm-hmm.
So
even thinking in terms of that little blurb as a third party that we're supposed to be posting about the fact that we may not actually get your registration there on time, just things like that begin to erode people's trust. And, as much of that as we can address up front, I think is worthwhile. Now, how to get to people, that's a whole different issue, how to get the information out there.
Okay, well, I think I love the idea of a campaign. So we'll start thinking in terms of what that can look like and how to make it effective.
I had a follow-up question, kind of both to Pat and follow up to Nancy, what Nancy just said. Has there been any discussion at the state level about, or even locally with the Speakers Bureau, kind of reframing itself and maybe doing online shorter presentations on just this type of information, maybe putting together some YouTube videos of people getting up and saying, here's how you find out, are you interested in becoming a campaign poll watcher or manning a Dropbox? Here's how you do it. Those can be 1 or 2 minutes worth of good information on a YouTube that if we had your Speakers Bureau people willing to stand up there and do it.
Good idea, Linda.
Mhm.
Thank you. Because when we do our longer presentations, they are generally presentations that come from the state that have been vetted. And they are a 25, 30, 35-minute presentation plus questions and answers. So that would be something that if Mary Ann and the board wanted the Speakers Bureau to look at, that would be fine. I'm sure that the group would be more than happy to do that.
And that's something that might engage some of the younger members that are more comfortable doing the TikTok stuff.
Exactly. That's I've learned about TikTok and I think that sets an attention span. You know, it tells us what your message has to be quick and repeated.
Pat?
At the meeting yesterday at the state, Sean Bartelt, who's the communications chair for the state, talked about web presence, et cetera. And Linda, I will go ahead and communicate that to her and ask. I think we'll ultimately have that, but what you're saying is sooner rather than later. And I'll just make sure that I ask her and I can get back to, what I can do is I'll send this to Mary Ann and we can put it in our next voter information or whatever. Okay.
Thank you.
Can I just, I have my hand up. Can I just say that one of the things our sorority is looking at, and hopefully it should go without saying, the laws have changed. The basic things that people thought was the case in terms of voting and their absentee ballot and everything has changed. When we talk about sharing information with people, those basic changes need to go out to people as soon as possible because we've got people who don't even know if my absentee ballot that I've put in a request for is still good. And we know that they changed the law so that it is good for another year. So you don't have to reapply for another year, but people really don't know because they're so confused about what actually changed, what didn't change. And it's that basic information about their absentee balloting and will there be a drop box and, you know, is it limited or will there not be one? Basic stuff that they're hearing about what's happening in Florida. They're hearing about what's happening in other states. And I think people are getting totally confused. And once we know what happens when they get totally confused, they decide they're just not going to mess with it. They're not going to vote. And I'll tell you, for this upcoming election, we don't need people just canceling themselves out of voting. We don't need that. We need people to be as less confused and concerned as possible. So as much basic information as we can give them, to give just the basic answers about what I can do, what has changed, what's different, I think the better.
Yeah, I think that confusion was part of the plan. So.
Yes. And we need to help clarify that, really clear it up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anybody got a hand up that I haven't seen?
I don't see one, Mary Ann.
Okay. Well, I think this is just the most recent discussion. I think we will be having this discussion and things like this repeatedly over the course of certainly the next year and probably after that. But this coming year is going to be it's going to be significant in terms of what happens in the future. So if you have any thoughts after we sign off, please feel free to send them in. We want to hear from you, and we want to know what your interest is in being involved also in things going forward. So unless there's any other comments, I'm going to ask everyone to sign out except Carla and Nancy Nussbaum. We're going to have a sidebar at the end of this meeting just to talk a little bit more about how